Hello and welcome to Maverick Dreamers and Thinkers. I'm Chloe Cho. As we ease ourselves into our usual routine after the year-end holidays, do you wish that you were somewhere else? Have you thought about taking off on an around-the-world journey? Many of us have these dreams, yet don't carry them out for a number of reasons. Lack of time, money, or health issues, and perhaps most importantly, due to fears and doubts about the future. We tend to try to control every element of life, and going away on an extended trip spells a lot of uncertainty. Plus, there's the perennial question of what happens when it's all over. What's to become of our jobs? What about our careers that we had worked so hard to build? And what if our skill sets become redundant by the time we come back in a fast-changing world? Despite the myriad of questions, one couple, Mathieu and Severine, who hail from France, decided to take the plunge in January 2017. Mathieu was a civil engineer who was in charge of a team building roads, bridges, and infrastructure all over France and abroad, while his wife Severine was a corporate lawyer before they decided to call it quits. They sold their house, cars, furniture, and even pulled their two small boys out of school to embark on a worldwide adventure. Even more drastic was their decision to forego the convenient way of traveling via flights and opted to sail across the vast seas aboard a cargo vessel while driving through land in a campervan to get off the beaten track. Over the past 3 years, they've traveled across 4 continents from Australia, Oceania, and Europe, North and South Americas to Asia, and they are not done. They've had plenty of thrills and spills along the way, with their car window flying away in the Gobi Desert in Mongolia, meeting a religious sect that was out to save the world in a remote village near the volcanoes in Guatemala, and having to wash up nude at a rural water well in Myanmar in plain view of complete strangers as cows grazed by. After traversing countless mountains, fields, deserts, valleys, and the oceans covering 43 countries, from Brazil, Peru, Colombia, Honduras, Mexico, and the United States, to New Zealand, Laos, South Korea, India, Israel, and the Palestine, they decided to take a brief pause to return to France to reunite with family and friends for Christmas and New Year festivities. I meet Mathieu and Severine in a beautiful but cold chateau in Loire Valley, just south of Paris, where they were celebrating the New Year with friends.
Bonjour, Mathieu.
Bonjour, Chloé.
Mathieu and Severine, it's so great to see you. We are here in this beautiful chateau in Loire Valley, just south of Paris. We just celebrated New Year's Eve in this beautiful chateau. You've been traveling around the world for the past 3 years and already 43 countries.
Yeah.
You decided to one day quit your job, take your wife and 2 small boys around the world in a camping car, in an RV.
Exactly.
How did that come about?
Yeah, why not, finally?
Yes, why not? Because we had this desire to discover the world, and I don't think we are the only ones who had these dreams. We thought, instead of living for 2 weeks, we decided to travel for 4 years. Because why limit yourself? We had what we needed to travel, and we didn't limit our time frame. We settled on 4 years because there are 5 continents, and we agreed to take our time to get the most out of our journey.
We have worries, we have our fears. What do you do about money? People have all these concerns. How did you overcome that? So you were a civil engineer building roads all across France, and one day, how do you get the decision to quit?
It was a good time because the kids were old enough. They were 4 and 7 years old at that time. So they were able to understand what was going on, yet not too old, because if they were teenagers, they might have needed to be around their friends. I had actually taken a year off when I was 28. So I knew that it was possible to quit work, leave the house and also friends, and then return afterwards and readjust. The same logic applies even if we took off for 4 years. Of course, there was the issue of family, but we agreed that we would return every year so that we don't lose touch with them. Financially, we sold our house. Plus, we had been working for the past 18 years, so all the elements were in place.
When you decided to leave, did you have a master plan in mind? Did you work out all the finances? Did you work out how you were going to live, what to do about the house? Because you even sold your house, your car, everything.
Actually, we wanted to live completely free, as in case we decide to settle somewhere else, it would make things easier if we don't have anything that held us back in our hometown, such as a house. And then, in coming up with a grand plan, we decided that it was best to follow the best seasons, as we had agreed to travel around the world in a campervan. Given the small space inside, we would need to be outside most of the time. Hence, we came up with a general list of where we would go according to the summer seasons.
Was it your idea, or was it a joint idea with Severine?
C'était une décision commune, sinon je crois que ça tient pas longtemps.
It was a joint decision, otherwise it wouldn't have worked, as we would be on the road for a long time. In a way, I think Severine wanted this more than I did, and I was ready. And once she started talking about it, I was of course in full agreement. We thought about it very hard before taking the leap of faith, because it's very difficult for 4 people to live in a tiny little area inside a campervan. Therefore, we need to be in sync. We even thought about returning to France every 6 months, in case things didn't work out. Even if that was the case, we wouldn't have considered it to be such a big deal.
After taking a huge leap of faith by quitting their jobs and selling off their house, cars, furniture in Brittany, in northwestern France, Mathieu and his wife Severine decided to go on a worldwide tour, but with certain conditions. They opted out of taking commercial flights, as that would be like cheating, in their own words. More importantly, they needed a drastic change of scene away from the life that reminded them of demanding work pressures and stresses. In January 2017, Mathieu Severine and their 2 small boys, aged 4 and 7, boarded a cargo vessel from Antwerp, Belgium, with their motor vehicle that would serve as their home on the road. Over the course of 30 days, they crossed the Atlantic Ocean, making 2 stops in Africa, 3 stops in Brazil, and 1 stop in Argentina before they disembarked in Montevideo of Uruguay. They chose to embark on their grand voyage in January to enjoy the best seasons in the Southern Hemisphere. They were keen to discover such places as Ushuaia of Uruguay, nicknamed the End of the World, located at the southernmost tip, as well as Patagonia, renowned for its glaciers, fjords, and penguin colonies. As they ventured into another world far from their home in France, the 30-day cargo vessel journey served as the transition they needed to part with the past.
Traveling via cargo ship, that was more my idea. It was because when we set forth on this global journey, I thought that it did not make much sense if we always traveled on land after flying into a destination, as the seas make up more than 2/3 of our planet. So the best way to kickstart our journey in South America was, in fact, to arrive by sea, because flying in is sort of like cheating. Plus, traveling via cargo ship, I felt was a good transition because after leaving our very demanding professional lives, we needed to find a new rhythm for us and also for our kids. It spelled a drastic change of life. It was a good way for us to rest and be at ease. As for our worries on whether we would get bored, there wasn't a single moment we felt bored, and we ended up doing things that really enriched us as a family.
We observed the seas, we saw dolphins.
We also saw sea turtles, and our boys loved them so much. They also spent a lot of time playing with their Lego. It really wasn't time lost. The kids also got to hang out with the sailors.
They spent 10 months exploring South America, moving from one village to another in Uruguay, Argentina, Chile, Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, and Colombia, before making their way up to Central America and toured Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, Belize, and Mexico for another 6 months.
We were going on a trek to a volcano. Our car was ascending a very steep slope when the clutch broke, leaving us grounded. As night fell, we were forced to look for a place to sleep. We had to stop at the first garden that we could find. It was part of a huge property with its own control tower. We arrived, we were greeted by the huge armed guys who explained that the tower was built to protect their religious sect from enemy attacks, and that the sect was there to save the world. We had no choice but to spend the night at the foot of the control tower. That was quite something.
An array of surprises and setbacks became part of their cross-continental adventure, especially in the form of mechanical or technical breakdowns or weather-related incidents, as they drove into North America, spending 4 months crisscrossing from one state to another in the United States, followed by Canada. Once their near 2-year expedition was done in North, Central, and South Americas, they set forth for French Polynesia in the South Pacific to kick off the next phase, Asia Pacific. They started off in New Zealand and Australia and then moved on to Singapore, Vietnam, Laos, Thailand, and Myanmar before touring Russia, Mongolia, South Korea, Japan, and India for a total of 11 months. While traveling through 43 countries over the past 3 years, what struck them the most has been the kindness they received around the world, no matter how foreign or remote the area might have been perceived, something they least expected.
What were some of the interesting moments you had on the road?
Well, what's most striking is that we actually haven't had any difficulties that we can think of, aside from mechanical, technical, or weather-related issues. While traveling through 43 countries, what struck me was that 99% of the world's population is caring and welcoming. We live in a world where people are mostly welcoming, and that's quite a surprise, actually.
Your window flew away in Mongolia.
Ouais.
And what else?
By the way, we were lucky that our 2 small boys went on a treasure hunt for the broken window bits, and they successfully retrieved every single missing piece, so that we were able to tape them piece by piece and continue our journey through the Gobi Desert. But we were not that lucky in Patagonia. I stopped the car at some point and opened the door to enjoy the beautiful weather, but I forgot to close it. And all of a sudden, wind gusts ranging up to 100 kilometers per hour flipped the door open by 180 degrees, which made it very difficult for us to drive to the next village, as obviously we were not waterproof anymore. In another episode, we had to repair the handbrake in Mongolia after it broke. We went to a car repair shop to fix it, and when our vehicle was hoisted on a lift, the mechanic forgot that the handbrake was broken, so the vehicle slid and rammed into a large 4x4, destroying the rear door of our campervan. That was quite something.
Now that you've been doing this for 3 years, you're not tired of it?
Non, pas du
Not at all.
Initially, when you began this trip, were there some things that you didn't expect? For example, when you are living in such a small space with 3 other people, even though it's your wife and 2 kids, it can be a little bit stressful.
C'est sûr. Je pense qu'il nous a
That's for
fallu,
sure. I think it took us about 6 months to really find our place and learn how to live with each other in this tiny space. This was perhaps the most difficult part for me, because I had a professional life that was very demanding, and to spend every day with my family in a very cramped area 24/7, that was tough. But once I took a step back and allowed myself to embrace this new life, it dawned on me that the real joys of our journey lie in the many adventures that we have as a family, and the trip actually becomes just a pretext. This is to say that our most meaningful experiences stem from the human interactions we have on the road.
What happens when you're traveling in such a small area in a camping car with your children? What happens to even a couple's life?
I think the point that's most important for us in managing to get used to our very small house is that we have a very large garden. We always manage to be in a place where the weather is nice, so that we can enjoy the outdoors in the best seasons. It's great for the kids to be outside and have fun as much as we do. This is why we always enjoy being outside and take delight in our big garden every day.
How big is the camping car?
It's 0 square foot. In France, we have a method to calculate the living space, and the interior of the vehicle is so small that it wouldn't even qualify for a single square foot of livable space. But within the tiny space, the kids sort of have their small area, which we call their room. There's essentially an area for a bed and where they put their stuff, so each boy has his bed. We have what we call a super small bathroom so that we can keep ourselves clean, a toilet, a small corner for cooking, and another small corner where we can eat, as well as 4 chairs where we sit, a bench where the kids sit and the adults sit in the front. The chairs inside the cabin can be turned around, so that's how we eat.
And what are some of the craziest things that you've done on the road?
In Myanmar, we went for a 48-hour trek with a local guide who took us through small villages, which was very interesting. The guide never went to school, yet managed to learn some English with the help of some tourists. We had to sleep in a monastery after walking the entire day, and it was hot. We were sweating heavily and wanted to take a shower. When we asked for the bathroom, he took us to sort of a large well where there were cows nearby, and women were tending to the rice fields, and he said, "This is it, you can take a shower here." He stayed with us the whole time, which was bizarre, but I didn't have any gown or other special clothing to cover up while taking a shower, so the situation was really odd, but I had to take a shower, so I disrobed in front of everybody, despite the Burmese villagers being very shy. But I really had no choice. In another example, some roads in Mexico and South America were blocked by village kids with a rope, which sort of served as a toll area, and they refused to let the rope down unless we paid. The kids were sometimes very aggressive, and they only let us go once we had paid. Apparently, these situations in the past ended badly when some travelers refused to pay. So when on the road, you have to play the game.
What are some of the strangest dishes, cuisines that you've had?
On our first day in Laos, I recall that I had no appetite except that I just wanted to have some hard-boiled eggs. And there were some being grilled at the market, which looked good. But in actuality, they were not hard-boiled eggs, rather fertilized eggs with fetuses inside. These were really disgusting. I also recall in South America that they eat a lot of guinea pigs that are either served raw or barbecued. They were so disgusting because you could see the entire body with the head and the teeth that stuck out of the mouth as well as the claws. Absolutely disgusting.
And what did you do?
No way. We don't try them at all. We can cook in our camping car, as we have a small kitchenette where we can make small dishes.
As we are French, we need to have our bread. We can't always find bread, so we make leaven bread on a pan. We don't use yeast. Instead, we cultivate our own natural leaven, which we share with other travelers, and we use the leaven to make fresh cheese as well. There's a little bit of technique involved here that other travelers have shared with us.
Were there some moments during the travel that made you very upset or feel like your security was at risk in some of these exotic countries? Because you're traveling with 2 small kids.
No, not really. But there are from time to time some curious folks that have never seen a campervan or even white people. So we sometimes have to hide to get some privacy in the evening because they want to chat with us, spend time with us, or peek inside our motorhome. So we tend to look for shelter in quiet areas. But the real difficulties are when we pass through the border areas. as we are at the mercy of immigration officers. And in certain countries, the process is very disorganized and riddled with corruption. Yes, they demand money, and it takes a lot of time, which makes things more difficult, even when the kids become impatient. That said, we also pass through some frontier regions without problems, simply with a smile, by being nice and calm. Generally, we haven't had major issues, but sometimes it's a bit tiring.
It's difficult to gauge the number of round-the-world travelers like Mathieu and Severine who travel as a family with their two boys. Based on hearsay and social media groups, they believe that there are about 60 or so families like them traveling in RVs or recreational vehicles and homeschooling their children within the French-speaking world, representing only about 10% among French global travelers, most of whom are backpackers. One of the toughest challenges they have encountered since embarking on this whirlwind journey 3 years ago is that it's super tough being both parents and teachers to their own children. They've made some adjustments in their teaching methods along the way and applied less pressure on their sons, Louis and Paul, who are now 10 and 7 years old respectively. As Mathieu and Severine put them through homeschooling as well as world schooling, a term that is being used more frequently lately.
Konnichiwa, hola, gracias, thank you.
10-year-old Louis, the older of the two boys, says he doesn't remember too much of all the languages he's picked up in recent years. He adds that while he isn't very good at English, he loves Polynesia, Australia, the United States, and the Galapagos off the coast of Ecuador.
So now that you've been on the road for 3 years, is this what you were expecting before you traveled? Or is it more? Expectation versus the reality.
Now that we've been traveling for 3 years, we are starting to have a certain rhythm when we arrive in a new country. There's the cultural element and everything else that comes with traveling on the road. Yet the issues haven't disrupted our grand project, and it's evolving. Adapting to a new place is quite simple. And it's really the connection with the local populations that's probably the most difficult part. But it usually works out very well. There are a few traps that we've detected along the way, but we haven't been too bothered by whatever problems erupted on our path. And they didn't trouble us much, as the joys and benefits far outweigh the small problems on the road. Initially, I didn't have much mechanical knowledge about car maintenance and repair, but I've learned so much. All things considered, everything turned out much better than what we had anticipated.
Is there anything that you did not anticipate before you went on the road that took you by surprise?
Yes, maybe two things. First, our older son was only 7 years old when he started this trip. I think he was really missing his friends. Second, homeschooling the kids, much like a real school, is difficult. And the point of becoming a teacher for our kids has not been easy as parents.
That's why we had to change the formula a little bit, and we let them learn by themselves. Our education is perhaps less academic than what was envisaged when we first got started. This is because it's very difficult for parents to become teachers of their own children. Therefore, we needed to let them be, help them when needed, instead of teaching them all the time, which is very difficult.
Do you think they can adjust in a school because they've never been to school?
I think they are always adapting to new situations every day. Therefore, they will adapt when they return to France. In fact, I think they will adapt very quickly. I'm not worried about them at all.
I mean, of course, they're seeing the world, but do you sometimes get worried if you keep doing this, maybe they might fall behind?
We're actually getting less and less worried. We did worry a bit at the beginning of our journey as we wondered whether they'd be able to keep up with the levels once they returned to school. We asked whether we as parents would be good teachers to our children. As time passes, we're actually getting less stressed and more confident in them and their ability to learn as things go during the day and throughout the year. They're learning something every day. Here's a good example. They picked up Spanish very quickly and were keen to discuss what they had learned straight away. But of course, now that we've moved away from South America, they're practicing less, so they aren't as conversant as they used to be. But this goes to show that when it comes to learning a language, it is far better to speak in an environment with the native speakers.
Do they speak any particular language now, aside from French?
They do have some remaining Spanish in them, and it comes back. They enjoy learning Spanish and the accent. Whenever they meet someone who is from Spain or South America, their eyes light up as they want to exchange a few words with them. And they're also learning English in a very natural way without taking any classes or courses, and the results speak for themselves.
What do you intend to do after New Year's celebrations? Continue your travels. You're going to South Africa. I mean, the money issue aside, how do you continue? How long can the journey continue?
We plan to continue our voyage until the spring or summer of 2021. So there's still a year and a half to go. The idea is to continue our travels, but perhaps in a foreign country where we learn to settle down again. We don't know where that will be. But we realize that as we make ourselves available, the opportunities will come. So we are not too stressed about the future.
Oui, très bien.
When you don't block anything and believe that everything is possible while remaining confident and free, I believe that it's only natural for great developments to follow suit.
Can you go back to your previous life after such travels?
Non.
So what do you do?
For my part, I will need a lot more freedom to work for myself, to take off for projects. I don't think I can return to a company that's part of a large international group, as I had done before. There wasn't enough freedom or breathing room, so it's really not possible.
And Severine, what is your plan? Can you go back to the same job?
No, I can't do the same work as before. I think I will do something different for sure. That's linked to my competencies. But nothing is defined for now. But working within a large company is something that I don't really envision anymore. I prefer an activity that is more meaningful. The fact that I have an entire day to think about this during our travels means that even when we stop traveling, I want to spend my time in a more meaningful way.
So what is the most important lesson you receive from these trips all around the world, 43 countries? What's your goal? How many countries do you intend to travel to?
We haven't really figured that out, but perhaps another 15 or so countries? But we don't really have concrete steps as to how many countries we want to visit. We just would like to enjoy as much as we can each time we visit a country. I think what we've really learned is the fact that we devoted the past 3 years to us, our family, and this is what we would really like to do for the remaining year and a half. As for what comes next, we don't want to lose our time in a company. As you may understand, we really want to take away this lesson that as time passes, if I work, it is to make a living, but we won't live for work.
When you think about your journey for the past 3 years, do you have your favorite moments? Something that made you feel really alive?
There is one thing that I really appreciate every day. It is having breakfast with my kids. It's really an extraordinary moment every day. I am really happy and I cherish this time as I have this family moment.
As Severine and Mathieu relish every moment of their around-the-world adventure and plan to carry on for another year and a half or perhaps even 2 years, they're not too worried about their finances. They've been successful at keeping their budget under control, foregoing pricey accommodations and restaurant outings on most occasions. Their monthly spending averages about 2,200 euros, or nearly $2,500 for the entire family of 4. So this totals about 25,000 euros per year, or roughly $28,000. Here, food and fuel expenses account for the bulk of what they spend. It certainly helped that they have not had any major illnesses or accidents. As they set off on the final leg of their global tour covering Africa and the Middle East, with much of their itinerary getting finalized along the way based on word of mouth and weather patterns, both Severine and Mathieu believe that they will know what they want to do with their future as the pieces come together, and that new doors will open to guide them towards a more meaningful future. They are firm believers that great opportunities come to those who are confident, competent, and keep an open mind.
After these travels, when you come back and meet your family and friends, Do you sometimes feel like there's a disconnect because you've experienced so much in the world and you have people who are still doing their 9-to-5 jobs?
I think we will pick up where we left off with our family and friends when we return, as it was the life that we used to have. But now, this life makes us wonder why we worked all the time, just to survive? And we were never in control of our destiny. Now we will need to find an activity that we like. We can't just idle away time, because time is limited. Therefore, we need to do what we really want to do.
Do you think about retirement? Because if you spend all this money now, and if you're 90, what happens? If you live until 95?
In effect, we need to continue and find a professional activity, and we'll have the opportunity. We've sold our house and left with our company packages. We don't intend to blow all of the money away during our travels. We won't return without any left, as we'll be around 45 or 46 by the time our journey ends. That said, we can easily work another 25 years. In the big picture, this is just a short pause for 4 years. If you believe that we'll live until 90 years old, it would be unfortunate to be afraid of taking 4 years off due to worries about what may happen in the future. And we'd like to leave some nice memories for our children, as well as for us. We'd rather leave some good memories for our children than getting an apartment or something like that we can pass on to them. That's the gist. We'll be using about 100,000 euros for our grand worldwide trip. It's a small gift that we're giving them now instead of something later on. And the kids know that.
So when you return, go back to your life in about a year and a half, maybe 2 years, what will you do?
On ne sait pas du tout pour l'instant.
It's good that we don't know, because we can seize the opportunities when they arrive. This is what being free is about. We might learn to get settled down again in a foreign country. The kids would love to go to Australia or Canada, or perhaps return to France, we don't know. That time frame seems too far off for now. We still have a lot of things to discover in Africa, so we are not sure about the details of our return.
We can't say much for now, as we're appreciating more and more being free and not having anything really defined. Everything is possible. I recall a conversation I had with one of my friends at the end of last year when we met for Christmas celebrations. I asked if she wanted to head overseas and become an expat with her husband and family. And my friend Valerie replied, "Oh, no, because I want to know what I'll be doing 10 years from now." Her reply really stunned me because in our case, we have no idea where we will be sleeping even 2 days from now. This is when I realized that things have changed. We have changed.
And so when the journey is finished, July 2021, what will happen? Where will you be?
On ne sait pas.
We have no idea at all.
We often don't know what we'll be doing during the day or how the day will progress, so it's tough to know what we will be doing in a year and a half from now.
In fact, we don't really need to know, and we are thinking less about that. It doesn't bother us that there is no certainty about what lies ahead.
As they hit the road again to discover Africa, they sailed from Europe to South Africa via cargo ship and planned to traverse their way up the continent and eventually drive into the Middle East, covering as many as 20 countries. Whether they call it a day in July 2021 is far from certain, but as Mathieu and Severine take things one day at a time, they're seizing control of their own destiny and learning that life is how they mold and shape it. Hope you enjoyed this refreshing perspective and journey of Mathieu and Severine. Thank you so much for tuning in. Join us for another fascinating episode right here on Maverick Dreamers and Thinkers. Do subscribe and give us a quick review. And if you're on social media, do reach out and share what you think of the podcast. To all the great dreamers out there, I'm Chloe Cho. Take care.